Well, thank you all for being here today for this first meeting of the New Hampshire House Election Law Committee Subcommittee on Campaign Finance. And we'll begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again for being here for the first of our 3 scheduled meetings. They're each scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. The next 2 meetings are scheduled for May 9th and May 16th. I anticipate that today we will go to noon and conclude the meeting at that time. The meeting was formed at the behest of, the subcommittee was formed at the behest of our Election Law Committee Chairman, Representative and Chairman Ross Berry. In the same action, I was appointed as chairman. Just so we all understand, I see my role as chairman as facilitating communication among the members. To that effect, we can start out a bit informally with a small group like this, but a basic requirement is that one person at a time speak. All right. If you're more comfortable with the protocol that people signal their desire to speak and the chairman then recognizes them, but you comfortable with that, the usual procedure? Or do you think that's too formal for a meeting of this size? I'm looking for feedback.
Start talking over each other, let's.
Okay, good.
The discretion of the chair.
Excellent. All righty. So I see the purpose of this meeting. I'm going to quote from a bill that was introduced by Representative Lane, who's a member of the committee, but not yet here. Review and make specific recommendations on the following items: existing campaign finance laws and any inconsistencies that may exist therein, determining whether state campaign finance laws differ from current federal campaign finance laws, making legislative recommendations to streamline and improve the current process in an effort to balance transparency and reporting requirements for both candidates and political committees. I like that last objective, particularly. It recognizes the need for a balance between transparency and the burden that reporting requirements can impose on both the public and candidates. And with that, we're open to discussion. I am going to facilitate, as I see my job here, by asking Representative Berry if he'd like to open the discussion with some thoughts. I'm particularly interested in hearing. My background's in engineering and science, and we like to start at the top with a concept and work down to specifics. So I'd be interested in hearing what people's thoughts are regarding the ultimate purpose of a campaign finance system and what basic requirements it needs to fulfill or what its success criteria are. So with that, Representative Berry, if you'd like to share some thoughts with us, I'd like to hear them. Thank you.
Yeah, the one on the right, the one on the left mutes everybody. I found that one out. I like to use that on Representative Muirhead a lot, right in the middle of his speech. Click. No.
Now I find out.
Yes, it's totally a technical error. So I would assume that the majority of our time will be spent on RSA 664. Correct? That's the one that covers campaign finance laws. And there's basically 4 sections in RSA 664. So there's the kind of general terms and restrictions that's in, let's call it the opening salvo. So that's 664 1 through 11. And then there's duties. That's 12 and 13A. And then political advertising, 14 through 17A. And then enforcement, 18 through 23. So, just kind of moving forward, maybe we should consider just going through those block by block. Obviously, some of them will be really quick. We should probably break section 1 up into multiple pieces would be my guess to actually look at it and try to find things that we can come to consensus on, because obviously the committee does handle campaign finance bills, and we do vote on them. Nothing stops anybody here from filing anything next year, but I think maybe we can use this subcommittee as an opportunity to find common ground and compromise on the issue. I will tell you right now, we won't agree on everything, I'm sure, but that's okay. So that's kind of my thoughts, is just go through it section by section and tighten it up and find ways we can agree, and maybe we just package it. If we find in the areas where we agree, just package it all into one big bill that we would hopefully all 6 of us would sign off on. And then I'm sure the respective sides would have their own changes that they'd make on their own, and we'll settle those disputes on the floor.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to share their thoughts with us? Representative Muirhead.
Well, I like that proposal, and I think that there are, in a sense, I think I can predict where each party has different priorities. I think what would really be profitable to discover is where there's some overlap, so that I think often, someone introduces a bill and the other side likes 40% of it, and the whole bill goes down, and the 40% that the two sides overlap on is lost. So if we can kind of front load that, I think that might be really productive.
Thank you. Representative Ward, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share with us? Okay, excellent. We're already agreeing on things.
She's easily impressed.
So, I mean, I think some things that we could find some overlap on would be transparency, would be one. And we may have slightly different differences of exactly what that means. But like one of the things that is happening in the background right now is the Secretary of State's office is overhauling the campaign finance online reporting system. So I think the subcommittee is kind of formed at a really nice time to figure out what the Secretary of State's office needs that we may need to change to kind of help them move to that system. And I do hold this is my personal opinion, is I would like to see a long-term strategy that got everyone, every single candidate, PAC, PAO, whatever you want to call it, onto the online system, eventually making it mandatory. I wouldn't do that in 2 years because I think you'd have people in the House would revolt. But I do think a gradual phase in of online mandatory reporting we could probably agree to something like that, specifically because I think there's things that probably frustrate both sides, right? So we see PACs or candidates they'll handwrite these reports, right? They're illegible, even though it says it has to be legible, but that's in the eye of the beholder. They'll fax it in, so then it's coming in on 64-bit or whatever, so it's illegible to begin with, and then it comes through, it's all pixelated, and also from an enforcement standpoint of view, it's hard. That puts the Attorney General's office having to. It's hard to tell if somebody's committed a violation because you can't aggregate the data in any meaningful way, right? There's no searchable system, and you could do it. You can upload these PDFs into OCR readers, and there's ways to kind of like make it a little faster. But I do think as New Hampshire elections continue to grow, as they become more expensive, and that's an inevitable thing, right? So you have state rep races now that are. You have state rep races now that are some of them are pushing $10,000, and 10 years ago that would have been absolutely ludicrous. So I think that's an area that we could probably explore. I know we would need a phase in to get the House to buy into that, right? If we just said every House candidate will report online, but there's other games along that campaigns play, right? So they'll hang outside the Secretary of State's office on reporting day until 4:30 or 4 o'clock with their paper filing, and then they'll hand it to the office right before the deadline, and that way it doesn't go up for another 2 days because it takes the Secretary of State's office time to scan it and put it up. And that's actually even if we couldn't agree on a mandatory phase-in of online reporting, something that I would totally agree on is if you're going to report in paper or PDF, your report needs to be in 2 days before the online reporting system, to give the Secretary of State's office so that they're all going online at the same time. Because it's a structural. There shouldn't be a structural penalty for not using using the online system, right? Like it should be. It's the online system that we have now, by the way. It's relatively easy to use. It does have some quirks. Relatively easy to search, but it needs to. We need to be pushing people towards it, and especially these big campaigns, right? I'm not overly worried about somebody running for, county commissioner who raised $750. I'm not worried about that person, right? But some of these political advocacy PACs, political action committees, some of these things are pulling in $1 million, and they're putting it up on paper. So, anyways, I think that's an area that we could start with overlap. I'd be happy to hear if you guys think you have some areas of overlap. I'm definitely open to ideas, and I don't want to monopolize this, so I'm going to shut up now.
That seems persuasive. I don't see, I mean, when, in principle, mandatory use of the online system seems right. You just don't want to penalize a low resource candidate who doesn't have computer savvy, maybe doesn't have a connection at their house. You don't want to make it effectively impossible for them to comply. So you want to have some sort of option for people to make it possible for ordinary citizens to serve. But in principle, I like that.
So how would we do that?
Well, something like that, to Representative Muirhead's point, you'd put in a floor or a floor, right? And say, so anybody, the first thing is I really do think you have to have a phase in, right? So next election, every candidate for governor, every candidate for every PAC has to go online, right? If you're savvy enough to form a political action committee in the state of New Hampshire, you're savvy enough to figure out the online system, right? So let's just start there, right? And then in 2 years, you could tack in, executive council races, state senate races, right? And then in 3 years, and 3 cycles, I should say, you could tack in, state reps and everyone else who raises over some number, $1,000, right? Because if you're savvy enough to raise $1,000 or you're savvy enough to spend $1,000, you probably have an internet connection. If you hit yeah, so you could just make it the current threshold, right?
Right now, it's about spending, not raising. So if you spend your own money, you still have to report it's more than
It used to be spend or raise, but I do know it changed. Right now, it's just raising. Now it's like expenditures, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was both. I could be wrong. I mean, because if you're raising it, you're spending it, but 664.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, it's another thing to look at is maybe we should
100 signs and you're over $1,000.
Yeah. Whoa. How much you paying for signs, dude? Jeez. How much you paying for signs? I'll give you my guy. I mean, that's another area that we could look at is I really do think it should be raised or spent. Because if somebody gives the point of this campaign finance laws, part of it is to make sure that nobody's, getting undue influence, right? Or who is influencing who, right? So if somebody gives you, $100,000, but you don't have to report it because you didn't spend any of it.
Yeah, it's my recollection that it is raised or spent.
It used to be.
Receipts and expenditures.
I believe it used to be. It may have been changed.
Hmm.
Yeah, it says, no, I mean, Representative Ward is correct. It says, whose expenditures exceeding $1,000. So, I mean, there's an easy.
Where are you looking?
664.7.
Reporting by candidates.
So PACs, PAOs have to report anything.
Oh, yeah.
No, I am talking about candidates, but I'm just reading 60. Uh-oh. He's already left. See, look.
Okay. Huh.
Another thing, and just I'm just throwing this out, not tangentially, but while it's on my brain. Another thing that we need to look at is how local parties report and what classification they are given. Because I think they kind of exist almost in a no man's land. So your town committees, your county committees, we have an apparatus for state parties, but we need to kind of figure out where to put some of these local organizations, because I think right now most of them file under PACs, but they're not really PACs. And it's another thing to look at.
They don't count as a political committee?
They're not a PAC, but they should be treated more like a party because they are a party, are they not? See what I'm saying?
A political committee of a party, like a town committee,
Yeah.
does not have to register as such. They're under the umbrella of the state party is how I would look at it. However, if they, again, this is from memory, we'll have to check the actual statute, but my recollection is that if you raise or spend more than 1,000, then you have to report that. That's the threshold for reporting. And actually, if you hit that threshold, I think you'd have to register as an entity also. That's my understanding. As a chairman of a local committee, I have looked at that and to make sure I was on the right side of things, and actually had a discussion with the Secretary of State.
But you can see how there could be confusion.
Excuse me?
You could see how there could be confusion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's something that I think that's really in the weeds sort of stuff, but it's something that does kind of need to be addressed. Also, by the way, it's a way to, like, do we consider that as a way around contribution limits, right? So if somebody, there's 235 towns in the state of New Hampshire, right? Or something along those lines. If each of them had a town committee and each of them had a 10,000, the donor could go around and give 30K, 235 times, and then package that all up and transfer it up. And I mean, it's an impossible problem to solve, but
It's my understanding that, again, I always try to draw a distinction between what I really understand and what I only think I understand. It's my understanding that as a candidate, if you've exceeded the threshold for reporting, you have to report all receipts. Anything under 50 or under, you don't have to report the specifics, but I don't think we're concerned about $50 amounts particularly.
No.
But if you got a large donation from a county committee or a local committee, once you're reporting, you've got to report it.
Yeah, once you're reporting, we have to report it.
So it is in the system.
Yeah, it's another thing I want to look at, by the way. The getting the employer, occupation, and address of employer is onerous. Just so everybody knows, I believe that we have to do that after $200.
It's now 200.
That is onerous, and it's not to hide who they're working for, right? But you're already collecting their name, their address, and I think that's a very common source of violations. So something I'd like the committee to look at is you end up with these reports where they'll say, information requested, and then they never go back and find it. And I just wonder to what level it's necessary. We may have disagreements on that, but I just have one to what level
Maybe the
it's
threshold
necessary.
goes up. A stray thought listening to you is that the AG, was it the AG who reported to us earlier in the full committee that there were a lot of reps who are in violation and are going to be receiving letters or have received letters?
I think it was our Deputy Secretary of State who told, no, it wasn't
No.
you. Okay, so then you're right. It had to be
It might
some,
be interesting for this committee to get some information on
Mhm.
what is causing all these, what has caused all these violations, and for us to just talk about which of these common violations we regard as serious and really errors on behalf of the candidates, and which of them we might think are a consequence of reporting requirements that aren't serving the balance of transparency
Mhm.
and efficiency.
I do remember the individual who spoke to us indicated there were quite a few that they had to follow up on and send letters about.
Yeah, they sent these letters out that said, "Hey, if you do this in the future, it's a $50 a day fine."
I do remember a representative sitting on one side or the other of me in that meeting expressing concern that he himself might get such a letter.
My goodness gracious.
How dare you? It's and by the way, going back to the online system, I mean, that's something that would make their life a little easier, right? It's easier to find. It's easier to find violations when you can run searches instead of having to manually pull through reports. I think the big one was a lot of people miss deadlines. So I know that I had to submit a report, and I had to submit 6, and I got to my own. I do my own last, and I submitted it after midnight, and I was in violation because I was after midnight.
I know another instance of that sort of thing happening too.
It happens. I mean, it's just because you have. It's not that you don't have too much time. It's that. It's another thing that we should look at I believe is how these reports are spaced out, right? So it's like 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, 1 month, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. It's just so that first those 6 months. There's a lot happens, and especially in that last 6 months period, you actually the organization start taking in some serious cash, and so that probably creates some headaches as you get this last minute. You get this 6 month report that's due, and it's actually rather large. And I know the feds do it quarterly. I actually don't hate how the feds do it in terms of reporting requirements, their schedule. But they have, they kind of have some moving. Theirs is based around, because it's different per state for the feds. They do it based on like when the election's happening. But they do have quarterly requirements, and with the FEC, you have to file online. I don't believe you can even file on paperwork. The FEC system, by the way, is actually like way worse to use than the New Hampshire system. Just if you're filing on your own, just an FYI, it's like I've used them both, and the FEC system is like way worse.
We all remember there's another reporting deadline coming up in May, right?
I believe it's due June 5th, June 6th.
June, or I thought it was May. I think it's May. Well, I'm gonna be checking the exact date myself before.
I know the
beginning of
6
May.
month. I know the 6 month number's coming up.
Yeah.
I know the 6 months coming up. That's another thing that I raised with the Secretary of State's office on their online system is there was this flaw. This is not for this committee to fix, but there was this, I don't want to say flaw, but there's this bug where if you tried to form, you have a certain, I forget how long you have after forming your committee to actually file, but basically like if you wanted to file the committee online after the cutoff, but before the reporting date, you weren't able to do it. I did raise that with the Secretary of State's office, so I hope they fix that in the new system.
Yeah, I've
That's
encountered
just an aside.
I've encountered a flaw or two in the current online system as well,
Yeah.
which I was told it was a software problem, and I don't know that it's been fixed yet.
Well, they're going to a new system, so definitely, in all seriousness, you should raise that. Whatever your issue is, they seem very open to addressing those issues. So I would raise it with them because they seemed very open to fixing it. But anyways, that's not for this committee. That's for
Right.
the SOS's office. But so do you have? Can you also elaborate on mandatory online reporting other than me? I mean, I've kind of said my kind of thought process on it, which is have a phase in and that sort of deal. Does anybody else have any ideas or pontifications about that other than myself?
Why don't we seek to get briefed by the Secretary of State's office on the status of any new system or changes, and then think about how that maps onto the current requirements and whether we might need to specify in the law something different in order to gently push candidates and committees into the online reporting system over the next 4 years.
So, your suggestion is to seek a briefing from the Secretary of State's office on the current plan to improve the online system. Sure. I see we have a representative of the Secretary of State's office here. Should I submit that via email, or can I ask you now to arrange such a briefing? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can ask me right now and tell me which day you would like it. I know you have a couple meetings scheduled.
May 9th would be fine.
Okay.
And would you say your name just for the record?
Oh, I am Erin Hennessy. I am the Deputy Secretary of State.
Thank you. All right. The request has been submitted.
That was fast. Another thing that I'd like to look at is on the political advertising side of it. I'd like to look at the disclaimer requirements. We have varying disclaimer requirements across various media, if you will, and I'd like to streamline that. One of the most common violations that I see is on printed materials and/or candidates won't include the address of the committee, or the chairman and/or fiscal agent of the committee. And I also question kind of why is that necessary? In so much as, you know, the information's available online. I would never not have the paid for on there, but when you start specifically for things online, right? So candidates will run these little banner ads, and in order to make that banner ad legible, the disclaimer legible, the disclaimer would actually take up like literally 2/3 of the advertising space. Because if you have to have all that information on there, so I'd like to find ways to streamline that. Another thing that we need to look at is political text messaging. So right now, it exists in no man's land, but it doesn't under New Hampshire RSA. The FCC considers a text message a phone call. So very technically, every political text message sent in the state of New Hampshire should end with, "This call has been paid for by blah 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 blah." Very technically, if you read it literally, that's obviously not feasible, nor I would say rational. But I do think there should be disclaimer requirements as to who is sending it. But I think it needs to be differentiated from a phone call, which is rather lengthy. It's one thing at the end of a phone call to say, you know, just so you know, this call has been paid for by blah 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 for governor. But it's something that I think we could look at, because it does exist. I mean, and there's always going to be the new thing in advertising that we're going to have to go and put under an umbrella, but that one's kind of hung quietly, and they're getting more and more aggressive. There are, by the way, carrier requirements for those disclosures. So the carriers do self-regulate to a certain extent, pretty aggressively, I might add, but something to look at. But I would love to get rid of you have to put the address of the committee on the advertisement. I would just love to do away with that entirely. I think it's what is the value of me putting 401 Riverdale Avenue, Manchester, New Hampshire 03103 on the bottom of all my palm cards? Is that going to change anybody's opinion of me?
Not once they know you.
So it's just something that I'd like to throw out there. I think there's ways to. I think there's ways to streamline it that wouldn't actually hurt transparency, right? Like if it says paid for by Barry 4NH, and you go and you onto the campaign finance system and you type in Barry 4NH, and Barry 4NH brings up Ross Berry, 401 Riverdale Avenue, Manchester, New Hampshire, 603-803-3448, you know, and the fiscal agent and the treasurer, what's the, do they really need the address? Do they really need to know that I'm my own campaign chairman? It's not like a we must do this. It's just a question.
Of physical addresses in all commercial life has radically transformed. You go to, you used to go to a company and you want to know where is it located. Most websites have no addresses on them now. most of them also have no phone numbers. And so what it means to be able to, follow someone or a committee or an entity and locate the accountable person is different today than it used to be.
I mean, you could use a PO address, a PO box. I mean, what does that tell you? If it's so and so campaign PO box, blah blah blah. What did you gather from that? Yes. Yeah, signature identification, lack of authorization. But I mean, in an ideal world, it would be universal across all mediums, right? That may not be entirely feasible, but I just go back to it. I feel that there's a way to make it more uniform without
without sacrificing the ability to know who's producing the advertisement.
correct.
I have a question related to that one of you guys might have a more insight on. That has to do with political signs, say, where there should be identification on it. How would we enforce that against an out-of-state entity? I'm not aware that New Hampshire law extends to Massachusetts or California. Doesn't extend outside the state, as far as I know.
Well, are you talking about a federal race or a?
I'm talking a local state race.
Yeah, I mean, local state races.
State race.
I would assume that we could prosecute them because they're violating New Hampshire law, right? And they're somebody is doing something in New Hampshire that is illegal, right?
Mhm.
So I would assume we would be able to pull them into court and grab them. You're never going to get everybody. One of the things that always drives me nuts, and it's like maybe I'm grabbing the third rail, is where these yard signs are allowed to be placed in public. It like really drives me up a wall that signs go in public places. I know I hold an unpopular opinion there, but as somebody who works very hard to put their yard signs in actual physical yards, it's very upsetting to me when my hard work is undone by somebody who 2 days before election goes and blasts some median somewhere, and they never get picked up. And that's another thing that we should look at is actually punishing people for not picking up their signs. If a campaign, I see both sides of the argument there, right? It's like if somebody takes my sign and puts it somewhere where I didn't know, but like ultimately, like you shouldn't have been given that sign out. Like if you give somebody 100 signs, they ain't going in yards. Like so it's just something that I don't know, it's a personal frustration of mine that.
Well, I'll give you an example of the type of public place you're talking about, because the statutes explicitly allow people to put their signs in the public right of way with the permission of the underlying property owner. So can you give me an example?
I mean, they won't even get. I'll give you an example of Route 101, right? You can go and blast Route 101. The property owner probably doesn't even really know where their line is on that line, and it's never going to be, it's never get picked up. And then it's, these signs never get picked up, and then you're looking at them, and I don't know. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, and I hate when people don't pick them up. And we did have that good law about that we have the good one, like people can go and pick them up from the same party. Yeah, but it should almost be, I mean, one of the things that we could put in here that I would really be in support of is after so-and-so date, any sign that's on public property after the election is fair game for anybody to pick up. Like, I would love that.
You actually beat me to that.
Yeah.
I mean, a month after the election, any sign,
yeah.
Any sign not on private property should be able to be picked up by anybody.
Correct. Yeah.
So
It
I
does.
apologize for being late, but is that related to campaign finance?
Yeah, so it's all in 664. Well, I don't know if picking up the signs is,
That's
but
what I mean. Yeah, that's what I was asking.
well, we got on the tangent because we started talking about the disclaimers, and then I went on my sign rant. But
Okay.
because we talked about, we're basically going to look at all of 664.
Yeah.
Which is,
Okay.
includes some of that.
I just didn't know if it was in there or not, so sorry.
Yep, there it is. See, it is directly relevant. You know what? I knew I was right. Not really, but I got really lucky. So.
Well, I do think it's related to campaign finance because it's dealing with a consequence of people spending money. I did introduce this this meeting, Representative Lane, by quoting from the bill which you had submitted, and quoted liberally from it in terms of our basic objectives, starting with review and make specific recommendations on the following items: existing campaign finance laws, etc.
Thank you, and again, I apologize.
No apology necessary. We all understand the exigencies of modern life. Do you have some thoughts you'd like to contribute? Okay,
I don't
thank
think
you.
we hold on. We talked about probably the only part you missed was we talked about looking at some sort of rollout for mandatory online reporting,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
kind of ways to get people there that won't freak people out.
right. I spoke with Secretary Scanlon actually about that. And so have them maybe come in and talk to us about what they have planned already. Oh, she's
they are
sitting in
coming.
the back.
They're coming at the next meeting.
Okay.
And we did talk about a little bit there, as you know, they're overhauling the current online system and making sure that asking them if they need us to change anything that would make that process easier for them.
A slightly different topic. There's been concern over the last 4 years or so about the possibility that LLCs can serve to obfuscate the identity of donors to campaigns and committees. Yeah. And so I'm curious, do you think that there is overlapping concern between members of the two parties about what's sometimes called the LLC loophole?
So I'm more concerned about the PAC loophole before I would touch the quote LLC loophole. So the PAC loophole being if some mega donor wants to give $5 million to some federal PAC, that federal PAC can then transfer unlimited to the state PAC, which can then transfer unlimited to a state party, which is then allowed to coordinate with a candidate. So before we go, not to take this subcommittee to a negative place, but before we go after the LLCs, I would not entertain. I don't want to be over the negative. This is truly how I feel. I do not want to entertain curtailing New Hampshire's small businesses while the floodgate of obscured PAC money is wide open.
It's not the small, are we doing raising hands and
It's-
it's more of a open, like a work session?
It's
Unless
work
we
session.
start to jump on top of each other.
Okay.
This is a work session and was posted as such,
I just
and
wanted to make sure.
the next two meetings as well.
I guess I don't see them as mutually exclusive. And I don't think it's the small businesses that we're going to be really affecting. It's the people who intentionally set these up to do it, to get around the loophole. I don't think it's small businesses because if those small businesses want to give money, then they can, but they're going to still be limited by the individual limit, but which is for each race. I don't remember what we're up to, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And I guess I wouldn't want to see them be treated that way.
Or let's put it just in a factual, proposition. Are there loopholes that allow entities to escape the requirement of transparency, PAC loopholes, other loopholes? We might disagree about whether such and such a thing is a, functions as a loophole, but let maybe just introduce that question and then do some factual examination to see if we can agree on certain cases, PACs or others, whether there are loopholes. The next question is, if there are, does the cost of closing loophole, exceed the benefit? And so we may or may not agree that we should do something about it, depending on how elegant it is to close the loophole or costly it is. But maybe if we could just focus on whether there are such loopholes, that'd be illuminating.
we should definitely put a day aside for that, because we are going to have philosophical disagreements on there, and I don't want to. I don't. We have the opportunity to find, I think, a lot of overlap, and I don't want to do that. Let's put that at the end after we've found what we can agree on, I guess is what I would say, before we because I'll end my opining on that this subject with this. I worked in campaigns for many moons, many moons, and I know that just from practicality in many different states, that the money always finds its way there. Legally, it always finds its way there. You can make arguments to me about it should be 100% transparent, but there's just so many ways to get around the law legally, to get around the intention of the law legally. That and that's has been one of my historic oppositions to the quote LLC loophole. Is I do disagree with you. I think a lot of small businesses donate via their LLC. One of my small businesses donates via its LLC. My issue with shutting them off. It's like my thing with them is, why do we always shut them off first when it's like you're trying to block up the stream while the river is running right over there. But that'll be, I'll end it with that. But my one thing I would say is we should do that last, because we will have disagreements.
I'm all for doing it last. I mean, I think it's really an open-minded, fact-finding spirit, and not a prejudgment that such and such a thing has to be shut off. So there might be, like a question about whether disclosure requirements are appropriate for the kind of thing it is. And I personally have a very open mind about the whole question. So I haven't prejudged what policy is absolutely necessary. Even anyway, that would be the spirit of it, I think.
Yes, I think it comes under the heading of balancing transparency with burden on candidates and campaigns in general. And I think a good first step here would be actually to quantify the magnitude of the issue. How much money is involved? I think we do have information, I think, from the campaign finance systems that as it exists. I think we could derive information on how many LLCs donate money, correct? We could get a dollar amount, can we?
I'm not sure that, well, we'll have to find out, because right now they're not required to register. So this is just a registration. They're not even, right? I mean, do they register? Do you register as the LLC?
No,
When
so
you give money?
yeah, well, yeah. When you donate via an LLC, you could say, give, this is from, X LLC. The issue is finding out, going back to the mandatory online reporting,
Right.
the issue is finding out how much, which LLCs are being used like this is difficult, because you have paper filings and you can't just search. Like, it would be really nice to be able to search, give me all contributions that end in LLC, right? And then it populates it up, and you could see, are there, but it's not just LLCs. I mean, these are nonprofits can do that. Any entity, any legal entity can do this, or group of people can do this. So we'll do it. I want to do it at the end, but to answer your question, to answer that question is, we wouldn't be able to really tell without going through every single campaign finance report, every single contribution,
Right.
And typing them out.
I mean, the data exists because the candidates have to report receipts. And above $50, they have to report the source of the receipt. So the data exists now. How practical is it to extract it? But I still think a good first step to discussing this would be to get some data on it. If it's a $100,000 problem around consideration, I'm not going to define it as a problem, but if it's a $100,000 level of event, then maybe it's not a big worry statewide. If it's 10 million, then we might want to look at it. But we need to, what I call, bound the problem. How big a problem is it? And what would it take to get the data to do that? I don't know. It's worth looking into, in my opinion.
I want to look into it, and I think we wait till the end, and we'll get the data. I think we get some of the data.
All right. Mr. Barry, Representative Barry?
I was just turning on in case we started talking. I don't have anything
Okay.
other than just ideas, things that aren't,
Well, I think this is a good purpose of first meeting is to get ideas out there.
yeah. Well, I like to look at under section 6.2, push polling is only right now subject to telephone calls, and polling in general is moving towards mixed responses. So some of it is still conducted by live person phone calls. Very few in New Hampshire is conducted by IVR, which is the robocalls, pre-recorded messages. And a lot of it is done text messaging, onlines. So that's something that needs to be tightened up if we're going to stay within the spirit of a push poll. I've never seen that loophole abused before, just for the record, but it's always been one of the things of like, if I was doing this, this is how I would do it. So just something that I think we could probably all agree on to tighten that up. And yeah, an easy thing to do that would be, I've never liked the idea of like they tell you how many calls you can do. I think it should start off with like, this is a message test or something, or this is, we are message testing on behalf of a client. The following what we say is, opinion based or something like that. Some sort of disclosure that would just get rid of because they have a formula. It's like if you're running for statewide presidential office, you can have no more than 2,000 connected phone calls that last no more than 2 minutes each. And by the way, like I did have a congressional race I worked for. They asked us, we had a complaint filed against us that we were conducting a push poll. We weren't. We had to produce our script. We had to produce our call records. So they do look into it. It's not like it doesn't happen. But it should be, no, it's state.
For Congress?
No, with federal, but we
okay.
control federal.
Yeah.
Yeah, which would be another
Yeah.
interesting thing to see is like, is that even constitutional? Because
Okay.
I think it's like Bass versus State of New Hampshire, or no, Bass versus Gardner, I think was the court case that they did about pre-recorded phone calls. I don't know. I'm
Okay.
getting like way into the weeds now, but that is a disclosure issue, which is under campaign finance.
I'm sorry, what statutes are there?
It's the definitions.
Oh, okay.
So definitions defines it as I'm going to Roman numerals. So 17 XV2.
Okay. Thanks.
664 2
Yeah.
17.
XV 17, and then I think there's an actual section about push polling. 16. Yep, identification of political advertising, push poll. 16A. A through D. Oh my goodness. So it's just another thing to tighten up, I would guess.
And you're concerned about push polling done most polling is sort of web-based.
Yeah,
now,
mixed
rather than
delivery. Yeah,
telephone.
mixed
Yeah.
delivery is what I would say. I mean, a lot of it's web. They are moving that direction. We don't need to get into the intricacies of polling and weighting and non-response bias, but it's our law. I guess the underlying message is our laws are all geared towards phone calls, and if we are going to stay within the spirit of our law, we would need to adapt them towards modern polling methods. Because you could, in theory, run an online poll that is a push poll that would not actually meet the disclosure requirements. If I said, Representative Muirhead, it's well known that Representative Muirhead hates puppies and kittens. Does this make you more likely, less likely? And I could run that, 50,000 times. One of the goal guys that it's a message testing, when in reality it's a push poll. Because our push poll laws are written around telephone calls. Just saying, if it was to be violated, not that I'd be familiar with finding ways around that. By the way, you may get some calls from your constituents about not liking puppies. Just a heads up.
That's out there.
Just a heads up. It was not cheap.
Yes, and I understood in the context of your remarks that there is basically no entity or animal that Representative Muirhead does actually hate. He's-
No, his favorite animal is in fact a skunk. Don't ask him why, but so I think there's stuff like that that we can tighten up. And then another thing that I would like to look at is when we did pass campaign finance reform 2 years ago. It was, I know it was the intention of this body to get rid of the pre-filing period. And the AG ruled that it still exists. So if you recall from the conversations, right, the total overall contribution limit for a candidate was $7,000. It was 5,000, 1 and 1, right? And we took it and made it 5,000 and 5,000. So we took it from basically $7,000. We believe we were taking it from $7,000 to $10,000. And we inadvertently took it from $7,000 to $15,000. So one of the things that I would extend as an olive branch when we get to that subject is putting it back in line with what the legislature's intent was. Because a doubling would have been a little much even for me.
Ross, do you remember the bill number we did
No.
that with?
No, I believe it was billed as the Sweeney Alexander Berry campaign finance reform package. So you can probably Google that, pop
Yeah.
up.
Lots and lots of coverage.
Yeah, it was a real barn burner. But I don't know. It just really upset me that they were like, no, you didn't get rid of pre-filing. And I was like, no, we like explicitly got rid of it. Like, and you just kept it. But probably something to fix before they get a new system. And then we'd have to deal with, obviously, if we kicked it into this current cycle, we'd have to deal with contributions that have already come in and how to handle those to make sure that nobody's returning money that they did legally raise. That's BERRY. No.
Oh, Russ is looking. Speaking of the AG, I don't know if you guys already talked about this. Were you going to have somebody come in and talk to us about, or ask them about what they see as the most common and what they would like to have? I don't know whether Ann Edwards will come in or there's somebody else there. I don't remember his name, but have them or at least talk to us
Yeah,
informally.
we did discuss. We didn't set a date because the
Okay.
deputy secretary was here, so that was convenient for
Yeah.
next week, for next time. But we did discuss. We wanted to see what the most common violations were, and to Representative Muirhead's point, how egregious are these? Which one of these could we stomach tweaking or doing away with, and which ones are actually like affronts to transparency and the limits and that sort of stuff. I'm telling you, you gotta look at me. Just do it by me.
I did it.
No, you better do last year. It's 2021.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah. That's 21. I believe I'm a co-sponsor.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Campaign finance reform.
That's right. Chapter law. Look at that.
So it looks like it's HB 263 from session year 2021.
It's a beautiful year.
Thank you. Representative Lee, in my opinion, having someone from the AG's office come in and discuss with us the most common campaign finance reporting requirements that are violated and an idea of the seriousness of each category. I think that's a good idea. Would you care to contact him and invite him for our May 16th meeting?
I will do so.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Say the AG person in charge of these things used to give us a thick report every year of all the investigations, but I haven't seen one of those in
Yeah, I mean,
5 or 6 years.
Ann Edwards came in and talked to us about orientation, but I don't remember, you're right, I don't remember the book. So I'll ask.
Do we want to scroll through the definitions? Is that too tedious
No,
to see?
we go through the whole chapter.
Do we actually want to like go through it like a study group?
Is everything at college? Everything.
This is what we do. This is
Yeah,
what
yeah. A lawyer, college professor, you know, and they did give me a degree, I believe.
I mean, until
I have it framed somewhere.
unless half the class is asleep, you're not really doing your job.
We better ramp it up then, because I see the members of the public, and thank you all for being here, by the way.
Riveting.
They all appear to be awake, so we need to
doesn't-
ramp this up.
Who
So,
doesn't wake up thinking, God, I want to talk about detailed campaign finance laws and disclosures today? It sounds it's just amazing.
So try this, page 218, 664-13A, there's a typo. We should fix that one.
What?
Can we all agree on that?
No, how dare you?
Repots, it's reports.
Where is that?
Page 218, the first page on 664.
Which,
Go down to 664-13-A, repots by governor-elect.
Yeah, of course.
oh, yeah, look at that.
Being pedantic. There's all kinds of these things.
Where does it say repots?
It's,
664-13A,
Hey,
under-
in
it's
the
the
table of
third line under
contents.
duties.
Oh, in the table of contents. Oh, repots. Yeah, yeah.
as we're dealing with
Well,
pedantic minutia.
I think they just heard HB. I think they were hearing
this
the. I think they were hearing the cannabis bill last week. Oh, come on, that was funny. Yes. Is
Yeah.
that online? Do you have the RSA online? Or is that just a typo in this book? I assume they copied and pasted it. Let's make sure that's not our only accomplishment, though.
Right.
We could take that and
Gotta start somewhere. where we
in
can
real
agree,
political
right?
fashion. We could take that back and be like, look at what we did.
Yes, Representative Muirhead, in response to your question, you just passed to me, which was, in the interest of transparency, I'm going to read it. Would it be appropriate to invite members of the public to offer comments and suggestions? I'm certainly not against it in principle, though these meetings are not advertised as public hearings, but I'd say that's, we'll play that by ear. To me, that's more of a time issue. If we have time, as I've said, I plan on these meetings going from 10 to 12. I'm not going to be rigid about it, but for planning purposes, and if we have extra time, sure. That's my answer.
Thank you.
So-
Yeah. I didn't even know if it was or not. Just that I'd pass it.
It doesn't violate any protocol that I'm aware of regarding work sessions. It's up to us, right?
Where's the typo, Jerry?
Well, it's not online, but it is in the.
If it's not online, then it's not a.
It is online. We're looking at it right now. It's not online.
But what do we
The
Hey, so,
typo?
I'm sorry I brought it up.
We're gonna get bogged down in the typo.
Are you looking at that same typo?
You gotta start
Which side
somewhere.
are you on?
Alright.
So that's on the SOS, but that's not the actual. The actual
the general
RSA is
report.
here.
this is
That's-
in the.
Nobody cares.
Okay, would someone please tell me exactly what we're looking at
Okay,
the moment?
it appears. So on the New Hampshire Gin Court site, which is where the RSA is housed online, it is correct. On the
There you
Secretary
go.
of State's
Ah,
website, it is
okay.
repots.
Makes me feel so much better.
All right. So there's a typo in the printed version
Professor Muirhead wasn't paying
of
attention.
the election laws.
For the Secretary of State's side, so it says repots right here.
Oh, I see.
But but on the website that you're on, which is where we look up the RSAs, it is reports.
I like repots.
Well, they're different. That's what I'm establishing. They're different. I personally prefer repots, but that's. I guess we can.
We just have to define it.
just have to define repots.
I will shut up.
He was never going to talk.
Jerry, I'm glad you made it.
Never going to talk in this subcommittee again.
Oh, my God.
As
We're going line
chairman
by
of this
line. You
of
gotta
this
edit it
subcommittee,
out.
do I have the authority to stipulate that repot as published in this list of election laws
Oh, God.
is to be read as report. Can I stipulate that?
You know what? If without objection,
In the interest of moving on in the discussion?
without objection.
That's
There we
the
go.
point, yes.
All right, ready for lunch?
Ready for whiskey?
So do you just want to go through definition? Do you want to set? We've got what our goal is to get out of here, and
Zip through them.
just want to start with 664.1 and just
Yeah.
read it. And
Yeah, let's do it.
all
Read
right,
it and weep.
Volunteers to read it.
well, we have a college professor here.
Whose idea was this?
Dear.
Representative Muirhead, thank you.
Provisions of this chapter shall apply to all
Read it
state
out.
primary, general, and special elections, but shall only apply to presidential preference primaries as provided in this section. The provisions relating to political advertising, push polling, and enforcement, RSA 664:14 through 22, shall additionally apply to presidential primary, city, town, school district, and village district elections.
Thank God.
Definitions as used in this chapter.
Wait a minute. What's,
We're moving on to section 2 now. We got to.
Oh.
That's what you're.
I have a
Section
question
2?
about
That's what
section
you're
1.
doing. We just
Is
did
that
section
okay?
1.
What's the difference between a presidential preference primary and a presidential primary?
That's the same thing. Presidential primary is the presidential preference primary.
You'd strike preference, but anyway.
So you want to strike preference?
No,
Ivan?
unless it's a legal term of artifice or something.
Well, to be fair,
Swain would know.
they actually are
Different.
they are actually well, they're not different in effect, but they are different in word here. So presidential in the first instance, presidential preference primaries, and the second is presidential primary. So do you just want to strike preference?
There's a lot of inconsistencies in the whole chapter.
Well, let's clean that up then. See, we did it. We thought we were. Everybody thought the definitions was going to be a joke, and then right there.
I don't think they're.
The
I don't
sorry,
think
the
they're-
applicability. Excuse
The
me.
lawyer is
The
not-
applicability. Oh God, here
The
comes the
lawyer will
lawyer.
tell you the definitions are often the heart of the issue.
Well, they're important too because they help prevent future confusion and ambiguity, which leads to confusion
Or they
strike it
themselves create
in a
the
couple
ambiguity.
Right. and create a greater potential for conflict, which is bad
Okay.
generally.
Okay. If that's suitable, definitions in section 2 is used in this chapter. 1. Election, quotes, means any general, biennial, or special election. Here we have political party primary
Or here's presidential preference again.
or presidential preference primary
Oh no.
as provided in RSA 641.
So we're gonna scratch preference again.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless, again, I think we might
To
want
be
to
Unless there's some,
consistent.
do some
Yeah, unless
Googling,
there's
and
a
if that,
agent
if that
reason for keeping it,
specificity of
yeah.
the word preference is adding something important, we can keep it, but if not,
We said we were gonna protect first in the nation, and here we are.
yeah. Maybe we should delete preference and add first in the nation to every use of presidential.
Oh
There you
God. And there it is. And there it is. And there it is. And there.
FITN to everything.
Candidate means any person publicly declared as such and for whom votes are sought in an election.
Okay, let's pause there. So, person who's publicly declared as such and whose votes are sought in an election.
So that,
Publicly
that would
declared.
not include what we call a write-in candidate.
Well, per write-in candidate if they're publicly
And
declared.
it's interesting that the
By
term,
who?
I agree, publicly declared, because we, in my town committee, we sent around an email suggesting that everybody write in so-and-so for an
Mhm.
office that had no formally declared candidate. So we've,
It's a different category, I think. It can be a write-in campaign. Can't that be carried out without the acknowledgement by the proposed candidate?
Yeah.
I'm aware of such things happening on the town level.
We
Well-
did it on a, in Merrimack County for, the attorney, for the county attorney a couple years ago.
so maybe
a
it
write-in
means
campaign.
publicly is, filed, who has filed for their candidacy with the Secretary of State.
Well, that doesn't happen until June.
Publicly declared, but don't they have to publicly declare? If they're gonna run a campaign.
What is publicly declared?
I'm
What is-
running, I'm running for, House of Representatives as a write-in candidate. I mean, they're gonna have to do something.
Or even if you might be that once you publicly declare, even if you just make an announcement, that announcement triggers a range of legal responsibilities, even though you haven't formally filed yet. And so the day, for instance, that candidates show up at the Secretary of State's office with their petitions, say in the presidential preference primary, it is often quite a while after they've already announced their campaign and are maybe considered candidates under the law.
But I'm aware of instances where an individual is proposed for an office and had no involvement in that. Such candidates can have no involvement in such efforts, and people have a right to write in whoever they wish on a ballot, and other people have a right guaranteed by the First Amendment to say positive things about other people in connection with that. So I'm just saying that this sentence as written does not seem to apply to write-in candidates or those campaigning for such. Do we need to change it? I'm not convinced we do.
We'll just bookmark it as an interesting phrase, person publicly declared as such. And if we discover in future research that it has caused issues
Right.
or confusions, maybe we'll have to come back to it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Number 3, political committee means any organization of 2 or more persons that promotes the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures, including the political committee of a political party. 3,
So, so this has three definitions. So this is A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D,
yeah.
E. Okay.
So that's A, 3A. 3B, if that's permitted, to go ahead. Any segregated fund established by any organization, the purpose of which is to promote the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures. C, any organization that has as its major purpose to promote the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures, and whose receipts or expenditures total $2,500 or more in a calendar year for that purpose. So I guess that would not be redundant because Section A said 2 or more persons, so Section C could include one person that has
Yeah.
also spent money.
I'll want to circle back to A.
Okay.
And I have trouble accepting that an organization
It's 2 or
would
more
apply
people.
to one person.
Right. So if it has to be 2 people, then C is covered by A. Because any group of 2 people or more, regardless of whether they've raised or spent any money, counts as a political committee. Any group of 2 people or more that promotes the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates, measures. So 2 people in my
Regardless.
living room, we call
Regardless.
ourselves the Lime Road, gin drinkers club. But if we're acting to promote a measure,
You raised
You
25
you don't even have to do that. Going back to A, if a husband and a wife don't like something,
they're a political committee.
technically they've just formed a pack.
Yeah.
We're not really organized though in my house.
So anyway, we should continue with the full definition, but I think there
Okay.
is actually opportunity to tweak there,
Okay.
at least streamline, and definitely one is covered by the other, no doubt.
Any organization, number D, letter D, that does not have as its major purpose, that does not have as its major purpose to promote the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures, but that makes expenditures that total $5,000 a year or more in a calendar year.
That's
That's weird.
extremely broad.
I
That's
know.
technically every company in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah,
Technically.
yeah, well, it's my household too.
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's not even
I
actually.
spend-
Technically, that is.
Well, I
every-
spend $5,000 or more.
I mean, that's a
Skiing.
steak dinner for you, isn't it?
Any segregate, so that's just, there's a little weirdness here in the definition. It's any segregated fund that's voluntarily registered with the Secretary of State for the purpose of reporting its receipts and expenditures under this chapter, or any organization that voluntarily registers with the Secretary of State without regard to whether such segregated fund or organization meets the receipt or expenditure thresholds described in this paragraph.
That covers your Tea Party on Lime Road.
If it's registered with the Secretary of State for reporting receipts and expenditures.
Next paragraph discusses what constitutes an organization, which
Organization,
answers
yeah.
the question I was just having.
Sort of.
Well,
We'll read it. It sort of answers it.
All right, so or any organization that registers with the Secretary of State without regard to whether such segregated fund or organization meets receipt or expenditure thresholds. As used in this paragraph, quote, organization includes, but it's not limited to, one or more natural persons, entities formed under, semicolon, entities formed under state law, except those entities qualified under Section 501c3 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code of 1986, semicolon, committees formed by a candidate, exploratory campaign, or political party, semicolon, and any other association of natural persons or entities formed under state law that's not registered as a business entity. Political party.
That's the next one. So my favorite part is includes but is not limited to. So here's the definition, but hey, this isn't the limiting definition. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, includes, the way I was taught, includes but not limited to is redundant, because includes means, here are some examples of what it includes, not,
Not all of them.
not
Yeah.
all of them. So,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
some people don't necessarily agree with that, and I've noticed in the statute, sometimes it says includes and sometimes it says includes but not limited to. So,
But either way,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
either way it's expansive because I guess the only thing that really disqualifies is
it's like we're giving these as specific examples,
That-
but there might be more out there.
that are not registered as a business entity. So they excluded business entities, but any group, it still goes back to any. I still take issue with A, which is any organization of two or more people that promotes the excessive defeat of a candidate. I mean, that is extremely broad.
Yeah, because I think in C just requires them to spend money. So
Correct.
in other words, A will catch them if they don't spend money, and C will catch them if they spend money. I think that's the difference.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
difference, but I take issue with the political committee being an organization of two or more people.
That promises.
I mean, if my wife and I say we like Alderman X in this race, well, we have now, there's two of us, right, have now promoted the success or defeat of a candidate. Have we not just technically formed a political committee?
Includes, but it's not one or more natural persons. Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's a literal reading, right? Right.
Yeah.
You know, because we haven't assumed a name, right?
And
You
you
know,
haven't. Yeah, you haven't
know,
formed
we-
an entity, but you are an organization. I think
Yeah, an organization.
here.
Yeah.
one or more natural persons.
Two or more. Yeah. So it needs to be. I think it needs to be tightened up.
yes, so under that, each of us sitting here right now in this room is a political committee then.
Well, I mean, I've just expressed my dismay at his hating of puppies and kittens. I assume someone will join me in that, and that will be a political committee.
I'm such a puppy lover.
That's not what I heard. So I think we have to tighten that up. I mean, you could even put in there as two or more people that assume a name, right, or something. You know, something that obfuscates who's behind it, right? Because if my wife and I promote, if I say, you know, Ross and Sammy Berry endorse blah 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 for alderman, I haven't actually formed a political committee.
And it seems like spending is really what we're,
Correct.
it has to be that plus A plus C is really the,
And promotes success.
I mean, you could combine the two, right? An organization of two or more people. I would just. I mean, could you just do it away with A entirely?
right.
I don't know if you can. That's not a like we need
Yeah.
to. That is an actual question. Could you
Right.
actually do away with A entirely?
I don't know. I guess I'd like to figure out why it's there and if it's ever been why did they feel it was necessary to do one as an organization without spending money and one
Yeah.
with spending money? And, why is it there? Was there some incident?
I can send that off
Yeah.
to our researcher,
Yeah.
our researcher. I'll send that off to our researcher.
And
Okay.
Can't you see previous groups like this adding every one of these paragraphs specifically for some reason?
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But it's like all things, you put you. The question is, did something that they add to it actually end up encapsulating the stuff in front of it?
Yeah, because they don't always do it as a whole.
Correct. So we definitely want to look at why do I get the feeling that the researcher is going to have to go get a red book somewhere. God bless them. So we'll figure out why that is, and we'll circle back to it, not to belabor it to death. Would you like me to read since you've been reading so eloquently? By the
yes,
way, it
yes.
is truly very melodic. How appropriate. Section 4. Political party or party means any political organization or number of persons which can nominate candidates in any manner prescribed by law and has done so for the current election. The definition of the word party contained in RSA 652.11 shall not apply to this chapter. So a quick, are you going to go roll over to 652.11 for us?
If I can find it.
I would take issue with probably with and has done so for the current election.
It's weird.
Right?
I think that's what's making them comply with this section. So if they did it for past elections, do they still have to would they have to comply for this election if they're not running anybody?
Yeah, I would like to say or the current or previous 2 or 3 elections or something, because you do have the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, right? They are an
Yeah, so there's
organization,
3, yeah.
right? They did not nominate. I mean, I guess they did nominate a candidate in the last election, but they
Yeah.
may not nominate. We also, by the way, don't know that the Republicans or the Democrats would technically nominate. I mean, it's a fantasy world that they wouldn't, but in theory it's possible.
So party shall mean 652.11.
11, yeah.
Any political organization which at the preceding state general election received at least 4% the total number of votes cast for any one of the following: governor or offices of United States senators.
And then the definition of the word party contained in RSA shall not apply to this chapter.
So this
Right.
this is a more expansive definition.
So this is a more
Party.
expansive
Yes.
definition.
For campaign finance purposes.
Which is probably good.
But I
That's-
think they,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
what
I
we're
would read
saying.
it as this, meaning, I mean, we might make it a little more clear than saying this, but it's the election that they are now spending money on and participating in.
What I love here is in any manner prescribed by law, except for where we actually define it in the law.
Right.
Is that not how you read that? Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
okay, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. It's any manner prescribed by law, except for where we actually say what it is. Okay. Except we actually say-
I have a question. Would somebody define for me, I've read this many times, but the definition of a natural person?
that does have a definition.
Person is you as us.
Yeah.
Okay, an individual human being.
Yeah.
Correct.
Natural person.
Okay.
Yes. No-
Person would include any legal entity. So it would include a corporation, a partnership, an LLC, so person. But a natural person is,
An individual human. Thank you.
in ChatGPT.
So an organization is defined in this party of 664-2. It's defined as by as little as one natural person. But a political committee defined in Roman numeral 3A requires 2 or more people. I think I got that right.
Well, there's multiple ways to become a political committee.
Yes.
That's
Right,
what we
but
were,
I'm
that's
talking
what we
about
were
in
talking
A,
about. What?
Roman numeral 3A and 664-2.
Yes.
2
That's
or more
one of-
people.
That's one of the ways, and I
Right.
take it. We're coming back to it, but I take issue with it. That's
Mhm.
one of the ways to form a political committee. Another way is to be a singular person who hits the threshold, right? So if like,
Yeah.
if I, you know,
I could register as a political committee
correct,
and spend $3,000.
which would be different from your candidates committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. That was one of the things we did get rid of, thank God. 'Cause it was candidates committee.
So the famous
Sweeney Alexander Berry.
Berry,
Some
Alexander.
call it the Barry Sweeney Alexander campaign.
Some
finance
call
board,
it
some
that,
call
yeah.
it that, but
So they put Alexander last, even though his
no, Saab.
name
I say
comes
Sweeney
first
Alexander
and-
Berry, Saab.
Okay, so we were on Roman numeral 5.
Are we good with 4?
Yeah, I think it's just they has done so for the current election is a little bit grammatically awkward, but it sort of makes the point that they're doing it now,
Mhm.
which might be necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I up again?
Yep.
Political committee of a political party means a state, county, regional, city, ward, or town committee of a political party. A regional committee shall be composed only of members who are residents of towns or cities that form a contiguous land area and shall have been created and approved by the state committee of the political party. To establish regional committees, a party shall amend its bylaws to authorize them in principle. A copy of the bylaw or authorization and evidence of the approval for each regional committee by the state committee shall be filed by the political party with the Secretary of State before the first Wednesday in June of that year. Has that ever happened?
Not to my knowledge.
I'll bet it was done in Rockingham County. We run a tight ship.
You run a tight ship in Rockingham County?
I am the chairman of a regional political committee, and I've never been informed by the state committee that they've done so. I hope they have.
Do you know why does this section detail the regional committee but leave out city, ward, town committees? Why is it so detailed about the regional committee?
I mean, it's really detailed about the regional committee. It's really like it got.
Well, I think
They covered it. I'll give them that.
city, ward, and town are defined elsewhere and understood entities. So he's trying to define regional as to differentiate them from other things.
But it doesn't specify who shall constitute the members of a city, town, or ward committee. It does for the regional committees.
No,
It's just-
but that would be left to the parties in their bylaws.
But why does it single out regional committees in terms of who can be an actual member? That's an issue that actually comes up, speaking as the chairman of such a committee.
Well, it's not a
For some reason, there are people from towns outside our defined 3 towns that would like to actually be members.
I think you were about to say
So
something.
it's
Oh,
it's an actual thing that comes up.
I would wonder, is it even appropriate to tell a? I do take issue when the state tells political parties how to organize. Like I've taken issue with that since day one. I don't like the state telling private organizations how to organize. But this is for campaign finance purposes, so I guess we need to see where does that fall, to my point I made earlier, where does that fall with the campaign finance laws?
I'd like to see an example of a regional committee. I can't.
I'm an example.
It's right.
All right.
We have 3 towns,
Okay.
We have Upper Valley Democrats,
and
which is a whole bunch of
Right.
towns.
But they all contiguous.
I mean, our 3 towns and our bylaws, as approved by the state political committee, include this restriction on membership. So,
All right. Never
And
mind.
again, I
why
guess
is it enshrined in state statute is a question I've had for quite a while.
because if they spend money, then they are a political committee and have to abide by the rules in here. They have to disclose.
Right.
There's
This is
a
a
re-
disclosure saying that if they are this, then they have to disclose. I don't think it's trying to say who is in and out of that committee.
But it does say that, though, who can be a member of a regional committee. There are requirements for a political committee of a political party once their receipts or expenditures have exceeded, I think it's 1,000 now, that we would then have to file a report. But why does it define, if someone from a town outside those 3 towns wanted to join us as a full member, why do I have to say no?
Right.
You-
And it
you
seems
would
like
be
I
the
mean,
same party.
that should
You would just
that should be between the political committee of the political party and the political party organization. It's,
I mean, it seems like this section is on one hand,
Okay.
delineating what kind of group counts as a political committee for campaign finance purposes.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, is also restricting what kind of group can call itself a regional committee of the party.
Right.
So that if I were to form a rogue group, Western New Hampshire Dems, maybe the New Hampshire State Democratic Party could use this to say, you're not allowed to. You haven't, your bylaws haven't been submitted and approved.
I don't know where it's in the statute. I do know it is at least past precedent from the Secretary of State's office that the various terms Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian are the respective property of those recognized parties.
Yeah.
So like I could not go form Democrats against Muirhead as much as I would like to.
Here we go. Here we go.
You could not form Republicans against Barry.
If I'm not here next week, you'll know why.
well, we'll have a theory
I'll
anyway.
defend you.
Might not match your
I've
theory.
actually,
The puppies and kittens.
And the Democrats who are against you.
Why would you want to miss such an interesting discussion?
It's just an easy intellectual exercise. I mean so anyways, going back to the original underlying premise, the parties own the term. I'm trying to flip through here. I don't see where regional, town, city, ward, or county committee are mentioned again.
I don't see it, and I don't see them quote defined. I think it might be their effort to try and define them here. Do you want to add that one to give to the
To
add
the
this last
research
sentence?
why?
Yeah.
Why the regional? I mean, I would do anything other than state, right? Why?
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
And we-
Maybe we can
We can each, I think,
simplify that regional committee
right.
language.
And I think we can each ask,
Yeah, well,
I mean, I
it-
wonder if there's a history. Each of us ask our parties just, do they have any history about why this might be here?
Yeah.
Because she may not know, it may not be anywhere, in the,
It definitely seems a little archaic. Anyways, moving on. Political advertising means any communication, including buttons or printed materials attached to motor vehicles, which expressly or implicitly advocates the success or defeat of any party, measure, or person at any election. So we could probably expand that. We agree, right?
what says
I guess it's
including?
any communication.
It's any communication, including buttons which
Mhm.
expressly, I
So
don't,
why doesn't it say political advertisement means any communication, and just get rid of the including print? Like, why does that?
Yeah, it should say, but not limited to, to go back up to the other one.
as
Right?
long as we're consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to be
Could
consistent.
we just delete the part about?
It is funny, like why wouldn't it be buttons or
Right.
bumper stickers?
Well, it should be.
But maybe why those are in there is because people don't get paid. So I have to pay the newspaper to run an ad or pay a radio station, but
Says here,
I'm not paying people to wear my button.
How do you?
No, but you're distributing the button.
Right, but so why do we need to change it?
we don't.
If we don't need to, I don't know. It just
Yeah.
seems weird that that's.
Gratuitous.
How do you attach a button to a motor vehicle anyway?
Well, it might be helpful to keep reading through the statutes
Yeah, there is communication next.
and see how these terms are used.
Yeah, because we are going in alphabetical. No, I guess we're not even going alphabetical order. Communication shall include but not be limited to. There's your not include but not limited to. It's not even included but not limited to. It's not even. Anyways, publication in any newspaper or other periodical or any internet site or on any internet site broadcasting on radio, television, or any other public address system, transmission by telephone or facsimile, placement on any billboards, outdoor facilities, window displays, posters, cards, pamphlets, leaflets, flyers, or other circulars, or any direct mailing. Versus indirect mailings.
Well, I have seen it. I don't like it, but in some documents, you can put in including means, and then you say that it means everything, not just what's listed. And that way you don't have to keep coming through here and say including but not limited to. So then it'll cover everything in 664 if we want to do that.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't.
not sure that's our biggest problem, but it's something that we could do to clean it up.
The nice part is transmission by telephone includes text messages, so you're all set.
Right.
There you go.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything there need to be added. I don't think I'm missing, because they have on any internet site, so that covers basically all forms of digital means. I guess if you wanted to get really into the weeds, which I don't know if it's necessary, but if you wanted to, you could, there are placements on apps that get used.
I think that's the.
And I do know a thing that is happening more and more is, so you have these services that don't allow express political advertisements, right? So like TikTok does not allow for express political advertisements. Conversely, I can go and hire an influencer and push my message. And that influencer wouldn't have to say, and so-and-so campaign this has been paid for by so-and-so campaign. It'd have to be disclosed in the campaign finance reports. But it looks like the point of, I know we're going to get to it, but the point of the disclosures on communications would be to include that. You could make an argument, is that any public address system? Could make an argument there. But I might like to come back to that and explore that more, of paying a paid spokesman saying something political. I mean, that's effectively what we're talking about. How do we cover that? Because that is becoming more prevalent, and I think we're going to see a lot of it in the next cycle, especially on these mediums that don't allow express advertisements.
Yeah, I mean, we could add social media in here.
I have a thought and a suggestion. I do want to be out of here by noon. I think we should be out of here by noon. 2 hours at one stretch, I think, is long enough. And I think we should reserve the last 5 minutes or so just to review amongst us action items that we've accepted and what we think the key points are we've identified here. We should be able to do that in about 5 minutes. My thought is that we should all remember that we can't achieve perfection. Even if we ascribe to a totalitarian ideal where we could control everything, we can't achieve it.
You, got you in mind.
So I suggest we just maybe for the next 15 minutes accelerate the reading of the definitions so we've at least read them and kind of have them in our minds a little bit.
Small fish back.
Excuse me?
Just focus on the big fish.
Just work on the big fishes.
In general, yeah, we should focus on the things that have the biggest impact on what we're concerned about. In my case, balancing privacy and burden against transparency. But why don't we just finish reading the definitions?
Okay. You want to pick it back up? You want me to go?
Why don't you do contribution?
Oh, okay.
Warm your heart.
I'm sure it will. Section 8, contribution shall mean a payment, gift, subscription, assessment, contract, payment for service, dues advance, forbearance, or loan to a candidate or political committee made for the purpose of influencing the nomination or election of any candidate. Contributions shall include, there you go, the use of anything of value, but shall not include the services of volunteers who receive no pay. Therefore, or the use of personal resources by a candidate on behalf of his or her candidacy. Contributions may be used by candidates for expenses incurred by the candidate for childcare. Oddly specific.
No doubt an issue that has come up.
Yeah, that
As
came
the
up.
special,
Right.
as the
It-
chairman of the special committee on childcare, I'm very excited to see that.
Added that, yeah.
It was added in, I think,
Last time
18 or 19, because it was not clear, and there were some folks who were paying using campaign contributions to take care of their kids while they
Campaign?
campaign.
Yeah, it's
So,
expensive.
but it wasn't clear, and a lot of people questioned it, so it was put in specifically.
Seems perfectly reasonable. Expenditure shall mean the disbursement of money of or thing of value, or the making of legally binding commitment to make such a disbursement in the future, or the transfer of funds by a political committee to another political committee, or to a candidate for the purpose of promoting the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures. Expenditures includes disbursements constituting independent expenditures as defined by paragraph 11 and expenses incurred by a candidate for childcare. It does not include A, the candidate's filing fee for his or her expenses for personal travel or substance. B, activity designed to encourage individuals to register to vote or to vote if the activity or communication does not mention a clearly identified candidate. Sorry, I'm putting a star next to that because that needs to be tightened up. Any communication by any membership organization or corporation to its members or stockholders if the primary purpose of that membership organization or corporation is not for the purpose of promoting the success or defeat of a candidate or candidate and measures, or any communication by a political committee member that is not made for the purpose of promoting the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or measures or measure. Measure shall mean any constitutional amendment or question which is submitted or intended to be submitted to a popular vote at an election. 11. Independent expenditures means expenditures that pay for the development and distribution of a communication that expressly advocates the election or defeat or clearly identified candidate or candidates or the success or defeat of a measure or measures which are made without cooperation or consultation with any candidate or any authorized committee or agent or of such candidate, and which are not made in concert with or at the request or suggestion of any candidate or any authorized committee or agent of such candidate. Can we at least acknowledge it's a huge run-on sentence?
Yes, and I would like to go back, just
Yes.
it seems like almost every year, maybe not this year, we got a definition about adding things into expenditure and trying to do some specific things that people had used money for, but it was not clear whether or not, in some people's minds, whether that was truly an expenditure. I just highlight that because it seems to come up often. We often see a bill that way. I still think this is pretty comprehensive and probably doesn't need it, but I just bring that up so that we might want to look at it in between our next meeting because it does come up.
I think something we could probably agree on is I don't think there should be. I think expenditures, and I know there's going to be an exemption coming up about like social events or something. I think any expenditure that a candidate makes out of their campaign or a PAC makes out of their campaign should be accounted for. That's just my personal.
Should be what?
Should be accounted for, no matter what it is.
Mhm.
It should be accounted for. There should be no. If they want to spend it on their lobster bake, that's their business. But we should disclose all of that stuff. That's just my opinion. But anyways, shall I continue?
Okay, full name.
After the full name means an individual's full first name, middle name, or initial, if any, and full legal last name, making the identity of the contributor apparent by unambiguous reference.
Middle initials.
Middle name.
Middle,
I was not even aware you had to get middle names.
plural middle names, it should be. For some
There you
of us.
go.
For some of us.
Middle name or initial.
Or initial.
Or names.
So technically, we're supposed to be collecting middle initial for every contributor where possible.
Yeah, there it is.
Technically.
Technically.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, probably look at that. Post office address. We're going to define a post office address. Post office address means individual's principal place of residence
Or
and shall not include a street or post office P.O. box if any street, city, state, or zip code. Post office address shall not mean an individual's business address. B, an individual's home address and rental property address when the home or rental property is owned but not occupied by the contributor. And C, an address not that of the contributor. Where?
He
C, right before C, it should be, probably either a semicolon, if not periods. Shall not mean, anyway. and it
Oh,
should probably
see.
say or.
They were consistent in that section, though.
They were.
Oh, you do right. They just throw a period in there. They're like, yeah.
And I think I heard when Ross read it, I think he read, put in a not that doesn't belong there.
Oh,
Means an individual's principal place of residence and shall include a street and post office box, if any. I think you read the word not there by mistake.
yes, that's right. Yep. Occupation means an individual's official job title resulting from employment at or ownership of an agency, organization, or other entity. Principal place of business means the primary organization or employer from which an individual derives his or her principal income and shall include the employer's official name and the employer's post office address. 16. Business organization means any enterprise, whether corporation, partnership, limited liability company, proprietorship, association, business trust, real estate trust, or other form of organization organized for gain or profit, and includes any enterprise which is expressly made exempt from income taxation under the United States Internal Revenue Code of 1986. It does not include a political committee as defined by RSA 664-2, Section 3, or the political committee of a political party as defined by 664-2, Section 5. Push polling. Push polling means calling voters on behalf of, in support of, or in opposition to any candidate for public office by telephone and asking questions relative to opposing candidates for public office which state, imply, or convey information about the candidate's character, status, or political stance or record, and conducting such calling in a manner which is likely to be construed by the voter to be a survey or a poll to gather statistical data from entities or organizations which are acting independent of any particular political party, candidate, or interest group as part of a series of like telephone calls that consist of more than 2,000 connected calls that last more than 2 minutes in presidential, gubernatorial, United States senatorial, or United States congressional elections, or conducting such calling as a part of a series of like telephone calls that consist of more than 500 connected calls that last more than 2 minutes in executive council, state senate, city, town, school district, or village district elections, or conducting such calling as a part of a series of like telephone calls that consist of more than 2 unconnected calls that last less than 2 minutes in state representative elections, and conducting such calling for purposes other than bona fide survey and opinion research. You're welcome.
So let's bookmark that one for refining
Yes,
because it's out of date.
that is just a disaster.
And I just Googled the Maine Commission on Governmental Ethics definitions. It's there are more
There are easier ways
up
to
to
do
date
this.
definitions out there.
It's interesting to me that you can make a call that's 3 minutes, and this doesn't apply.
Correct. Yep. Bona fide opinion research means the collection and analysis of data regarding opinions, needs, awareness, knowledge, views, experiences, or behaviors of a population through the development and administration of surveys, interviews, focus group polls, observation, or other research methodologies in which no sales, promotional, or marketing efforts are involved, and through which there is no attempt to influence a participant's attitudes or behavior. Bona fide survey and opinion research includes message testing, which is the study for the research purpose of how randomly selected individuals react to positive or negative information of a candidate, elected, public official, or ballot question. Receipts shall mean the receipt of money or thing of value of the receipt of a legally binding commitment to receive money or thing of value in the future for the purpose of promoting the success or defeat of a candidate of or measures. Receipts shall not include amounts received by a political committee in commercial transactions in the ordinary course of any trade or business conducted by the political committee or in the form of investments in the political committee, or the amounts received by the political committee from payers who, at the time of payment, prohibited in writing the use of the payment as an expenditure. We have 3 more.
Mhm.
Segregated fund shall mean a segregated account of money that consists of funds that were paid directly to such account by persons other than the covered political committee that controls the account from which only expenditures defined in paragraph 9 are made. 21. Clearly identified candidate means the name of the candidate involved appears, a photograph or drawing of the candidate appears, or the identity of the candidate is otherwise apparent. And last but not least, 22. Political advocacy organizations mean any entity that spends $5,000 or more in a calendar year to pay for a communication that is functionally equivalent to express advocacy because, when taken as a whole, such communication is likely to be interpreted by a reasonable person only as advocating the election or defeat of the clearly identified candidate or candidates or the success of it or defeat of a measure or measures, taking into account whether the communication involved mentions a candidacy or a political party or takes a position on a candidate's characters, qualifications, or fitness for office.
We just changed that.
We did.
And the Senate has to change.
They did.
This one's gonna change.
Excellent.
That was
We did it.
so.
Assuming the governor signs it.
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
I said we passed it. I didn't say it has been enacted into law.
Yes. Fair enough. All right.
Okay.
So as an action item, I could suggest that maybe individuals collect a list, individuals who want to make changes to this section, bring a list of suggested changes to the next meeting and distribute it.
I agree with that. I will send off to our researcher regional committees and section 3, 664.2, section 3, number A, letter A, about why why the definition exists. So those are the two things I'm doing, and apparently what Professor, are you professor or Dr. Muirhead?
Professor, I
Yeah,
feel
Professor
like if you
Muirhead.
can't help someone who's having a heart attack,
Oh wow,
you shouldn't be called doctor.
it's high. That's very high and mighty of you.
Well, I would say it's context dependent. If someone needs urgent help in resolving a question of political theory, I think you could then use the title. So, anyway, Ross, would you repeat those two, please?
I'm doing section 2, 664.2, section 3, definition A, as a research question, and same 664.2, section 5, as to regional committees. Why are we doing that sort of stuff?
Okay.
Action item question. Is anyone, are you contacting the AG's office?
Yes.
Okay.
Also contact the Democratic Party and ask them about why that last sentence in defining political committee is, if they have any history about that, because I know you're going to ask
Yeah,
the
I'll
researcher, but I'm going to
I'll
ask, I'll ask them too, because I just don't know.
I had an action item about contacting the Secretary of State's office, but I've taken care of that.
Big lift. Big lift. Yeah, big lift there. Thanks, Ian. Fearless leadership right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All right. Well, it's 6 minutes to 12 according to the clock on the wall. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss?
Are we meeting, is it next 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks, on the 9th and the 16th.
Okay.
Okay.
What
No.
am I going to do with this extra 6 minutes today?
Gavel it down. Smack the gavel.
Based on your comments over the last month, I'm sure you can find something.
Oh, jeez.
You can start your drive home sooner. All right, then, I'm going to adjourn this meeting
okay,
at 11:55. Meeting's adjourned.
thank
I'm
you.
going to go to the car wash. I'm going to use it to go to the car wash.
Very good.
I'm going to get my undercarriage washed.
I will see you all in